Hello and welcome to Take Time. I am your host, Patrick Marlett. Today we're taking a look at an Arthurian legend, a new watch by Merlin Watch Company. Much like Merlin himself, this premier model from the brand will be seen in a variety of forms. From the tsunami to the knacker, here comes the rise of the sea legend. Before we begin the video today, I want you all to know that this sample unit is only being lent in for review, but the company does intend to send me a production unit once the Kickstarter has completed. So a special thanks goes out to Merlin Watch Company for sending this unit my way. Now, as I like to do with all my reviews here on the channel, we're going to start with the bad and then move on to the good before giving my final verdict on the review item. So without further ado, let's talk Sea Legend. To start, as this is a sample model, let's go over what is and isn't accurate with this unit as opposed to the production units. The bezel is fixed on the samples, but will be 120 click unidirectional. The crown here is a simple push-pull, but will be screwed down once complete. The buckle, as you may notice, features the Merlin text upside down. This will be righted with the production units. Now here's where you and I come in. There are finishing touches that have yet been determined for the Sea Legend concerning the case and hands. The dial here features brushed hands and applied indices. However, the production units will be polished. Also, the case on the end product will be detailed similarly to the Tsunami, with brushed sides and a high polished beveled edge, and not like the Knacker with its high polished sides and brushed beveled edge. The team over at Merlin Watch Company has been very receptive of my opinions, and I'm certain they'd love to hear yours as well. So list how you'd prefer these aspects of the watch be finished below. Personally, I would love the switch to high polished markers and hands, making them more eye-catching and similar to the vintage divers I'm fond of. Also, if I could have it any other way, I'd rather the sides be high polished alongside the top and underside beveling, with the same concentric brushstrokes atop the lugs to really give it that vintage aesthetic. However, I digress. Let's talk about what you will certainly receive when the Merlin Sea Legend rolls out production. Each model will be fitted with a Sellita SW200, a display caseback featuring it, and despite the depth rating stated here, a depth rating of 200 meters. An anti-reflective sapphire crystal will rest opposite the dial with a matching sapphire crystal bezel insert. Other areas of note are the C3 Swiss Superluminova that will be applied to the bezel, handset, and dial, and the 3 accessory options made available at launch: sailcloth, Italian leather, and bead of rice bracelet. When I first took in this watch, I immediately thought of the Eternomatic Super Kontikis of old, those earlier 60s divers, and their dial configuration, that of the lume plots and blacked out numerals. We have a very similar aesthetic here, but with a slightly different execution. I feel most folks will love this dial, but there are 2 things that really bug me: the font choice of the numerals and the size of the 3, 6, 9, and 12 indices. It's more than enough that they're marked, but I would have preferred these markers be enlarged, not only to give the dial more character, but to allow for larger numerals to be placed within the markers. I have fairly decent eyesight, but I can imagine these simply being just for show to someone with poor vision. In regards to the font, it's far too sterile for my liking. Speaking of those 60s Kontikis, the font was round and curvaceous, nary a sharp angle. Here, we're treated to, and I'm no font master, but something like a squared off Arial font that feels uninspiring. The dial here is clearly the main attraction, and it's absolutely gorgeous, but certain elements of its design don't work stylistically. I'm going to chalk up this next note as a neutral one, but the syringe hands. I wish they were swords. I honestly don't see sword hands enough, and on this dial they would have looked amazing. You could even leave the seconds hand as is, but a pair of sword hands would have matched this dial's character a slight bit better in my opinion. However, Merlin's advice did lead to many great design elements here. These samples have been a real treat. Everything from their scale to their killer looks and extreme wearability are all top-notch. I'm obsessed with the Knacker. The Hokusai-inspired wave pattern of the Tsunami center disc is lovely, but the organic touch with the mother of pearl on the Knacker is everything for me. Blue divers are a dime a dozen, but how often do you see a pearlescent dial quite like this? I hope this trend continues and they make an abalone-centered dial with their next iterations, as the dial's composition lends to having exotic materials or patterns placed in that central area. For all the designs, it's a lovely concept and one I'd like to see even more of in future versions. Speaking of, here's the Knacker Sea Legend on my 7¼ inch wrist on the equipped sailcloth strap, which I might add is built impeccably well. Here's what it'll look like for all of your admirers, and when you are going to admire it, it's going to look a little something like this. It's tough to make any more calls on these sample units as much of the finished design has yet to unfold. The 2 accessories I received, both excellent. The price, even better, particularly if purchased during the Kickstarter period. The design? I would love to see these models given the full vintage treatment. High polish, all the things, but leave the top of the lugs and the case back brushed. Give us polished sword hands alongside those polished indices, a friction-based bezel instead because we're on that vintage wagon, and while we're there, a nice rubber strap option as well. There's a lot to love here with a unique design just brimming with potential. No wonder Merlin came doting upon this model. The Sea Legend might just perfectly emulate that vintage reissue aesthetic with a few more tweaks. Again, my name is Patrick Marlett, and thank you for the time.